is that sex in today's marketplace is extremely cheap. It's cheap because sex must now precede commitment. There's a whole other spiel I can give you about why that's the case, but let's table that for now because I still want to answer your question.
That's changed since our parents' generation, perhaps.
It's changed in the last 60 years, and the main instigator of the change was birth control. 2-minute sidebar. The reason why commitment had to precede sex for so long is because the threat of pregnancy always loomed large. And in that day, it was extremely difficult, if not impossible, for a woman to earn her own money and to survive in society without the protection or provision of a man or a governmental program that served as its surrogate. And all of those things have changed. The reason why commitment was required before sex was because the stakes of a woman becoming pregnant outside of marriage were extremely high. And it was upheld socially because if that man couldn't be persuaded or coerced to commit, then that single unwed mother and her children would have become society's problem. So all of these things have changed. Women can and do earn their own money. There are all kinds of governmental programs to subsidize single mothers. Men, whether they commit to this arrangement or not, are legally required to give women child support for the children that they sire, in some cases even for the children that they don't. So the circumstances for requiring commitment prior to sex have shifted. And once a few women started to be okay with a sexual relationship prior to an exclusive commitment or marriage, once a critical mass was reached, then functionally all other women had to do the same in order to remain competitive within the sexual marketplace. Because in today's day and age, if you were to go out on the first date with a woman and she were to insist, well, I'm not going to have sex until I get married, especially if she's not a virgin, she's going to price herself out of the sexual marketplace. That's going to be too expensive for any given man when there's a woman 2 swipes away who's going to be willing to go home with him for a drink or two. So that's the situation that we live in, for better or for worse. So sex is kind of the standard. We used to say, why buy the cow if you can get the milk for free, right? Well, that presumes that milk wasn't being freely distributed in the pasture. But now that milk is freely being distributed in the pasture, you have to give milk, not because milk will motivate anyone to make the sale, but because not providing milk is going to be in a strange absence. It's going to be more expensive for the buyer in a way that none of the competitors are requiring. Okay?
Yeah, I'll have to agree with this to an extent. Obviously, he's talking about the Western point of view, how things are in a lot of European countries and North American countries. I believe it has also increased in every other country as well. But, it's still very different in a lot of other parts of the world. Yes, women are increasingly getting more, independent, and they might not need a man also because of the birth control. People are able to ensure that they don't get pregnant when they have sex. So, and they don't need to have a commitment. They don't necessarily need to have a commitment before they can decide to have sex. And it's prevalent in so many other places. But I just feel like there are many other places where they still very much hold to the old values, especially in terms of ethnic places, in terms of other religions, people who have religious beliefs. There are still people who ensure that, sex does not precede commitment. Many of them that even still believe that they still go on to have sex, but they don't do it in a Western kind of way. I feel like in the West, Sex is very, very cheap, and it is just too cheap, like he said. And there are people who have 50, 100, 150 body counts, and they don't have any type of commitment with any of those people. They've never gotten pregnant because they're very careful. Some people get pregnant and get the abortions. They decide to live their lives like this for so many years before getting married at a very late stage. That is not the case in so many parts of the world, where even if they decide to have sex early, or like they might have sex maybe once, twice, 3 times before they decide to get married, because they know that they still require a commitment from a man, and because of a lot of their beliefs and their background, they do not treat sex as a very cheap item, object, or whatever you want to call it.
Okay, so this is the world that we live in, for better or for worse. So when women provide a sexual opportunity, it's a good idea to not just be a run-of-the-mill sexual opportunity. Because let me tell you, I've worked with thousands of men in my private practice and in my consultations. And men fall in love with strippers, men fall in love with prostitutes, men fall in love with women with personality disorders every single day. Why is that? Is it because these women love them so much? Is it because they're kind? Is it because they're supportive or virtuous? No, it's because they fuck these men to the point where their brains start to melt. Okay? And when a man has brain melting, face skewing, life altering sex, it's like a drug. And it's like all that guy can think about. And that guy isn't going to just hit and quit a woman who does the freaky nasty shit for him, because he knows he can't get that on any street corner.
That's the second time I've laughed in 8,000 interviews. The first time was last week.
So, I mean, does this make sense to you?
It makes perfect sense.
Okay, so they used to say that the way to a man's heart is through his stomach. It's actually just a few inches lower. And there's no reason why, I mean, all these are like behaviors. There's no reason why a non-stripper / prostitute / borderline couldn't learn to do some of the things in the bedroom that these women tend to do, and to get men obsessed with them. Okay? So once you target a man and you provide the sexual opportunity and you're the nastiest, sluttiest version of yourself, then you have an in. Like, you're within the city, and you're not going to be kicked out anytime soon. You're not going to be pumped and dumped if you're an amazing, over-the-top sexual experience. Okay? It's very, very important. And you don't want to do this with everybody, because that just is a race to the bottom too, because it becomes harder and harder to be the nastiest, sluttiest version of yourself if you're that with every single guy. That's why you have to do your homework, and you want to hunt, and you want to target specific men.
Be selective.
It's important to be very selective as a woman, because men have a very understandable, but from a woman's perspective, extremely frustrating double standard with respect to female chastity. Chastity is something that they would highly prize in a wife and don't want to see anything in a casual lover. But the fact of the matter is that the pathway to become a wife for the vast majority of women is through the casual lover route. Most women will see this happening. They'll be with a guy casually for some months, maybe even some years, and then the guy will catch feelings. Usually guys, it takes a little bit longer for them to catch feelings. And then they'll start to ask questions. How many guys you been with? What's your family like? Patrice O'Neill had this great joke once where his girlfriend had been with him for 7 years and he had been with her for 4. Like, it took 3 years for him to kind of like see that woman as his girlfriend, And that's when the relationship begins to shift. And that's when the guy starts to become a little bit more possessive, potentially. Don't go out to the club, or why are you dressed like that? They're not going to act like that on the first date. They're just looking to smash, right? So the fact of the matter is, most men don't show up on first dates thinking oh, please, Jesus Allah Buddha, make this the last date I ever have to go on. I'm ready for the one. I'm ready for my wife. I want to settle down today. They're thinking, I hope she mostly looks like her pictures and she lets me smash. That's what most guys are thinking. And so to get, and a lot of women, when they show up to their first date, they're not thinking,